And welcome to the Midday Show. I am Jeff Everett. He is Mark Messina. I'm calling this one the Clickbait episode. Clickbait episode. We're going to go through some topics, but a lot of this just stuff that you've seen, stuff that you've clicked on. Can I tell? This is how we ended up on this. I want
to finish this first. I got with the clock at 16. With the clock counting down at 16, I got a text. Honest to God.
Look at the shock on my face. I was reading something to you. It was a story, I believe. I think it was about one of the priests, one of the issues they had on Penn Live. And I was reading the story to you, and you said, where was that at? And I said, I don't know. I didn't click on it. And you said, you're a lot stronger than me.
That is true. That is true. And so I even said to you, I think my phone I don't even think I have to click on the stories. I think my phone just opens them. They're like, Mark's going to read this one.
Right. So we are going to go through some stuff. First, we want to talk, might not start with it, but at some point we do want to talk about just kind of like sports fights, sportsmanship, kind of where does it start? Where does it end? What is good? What is bad? We're going to touch on that at some point. You have some clickbait stuff for us about Vikings, about penguins mating.
Vikings and mating penguin.
And then there is some stuff trending on Twitter that I don't know if it was worth like a graphic, but I do think like it's worth bringing up a mention. Maybe we'll throw out our 2 cents. We won't deep dive into it and sit on both sides of the fence like we usually do.
Well, yesterday, we were in a discussion in the news director's office about penguins. And I don't even remember. I think it started, someone mentioned the Morgan Freeman voice. Okay. And it went into March of the Penguins.
I wrote a script for us, and I jokingly said, as I was writing it, the voice in my head was Morgan Freeman.
And then I said, do you see penguins marching around there? It went from there. So we got into a brief penguin discussion. There was a clickbait article that it was like something about 25 myths or things you believe to be true that aren't.
About penguins.
About anything.
Oh, okay, got it.
Now, to me, maybe this is, maybe I'm that simple. I am all in. I can't click on this fast enough. It's because I am ready to read what these myths are. And one of them.
Well, wait, real quick, because I think can we talk about that first?
Sure.
And then talk about penguins. Just walk us through when you see something that is clickbait and it's so clearly clickbait, like what was the title of that one again?
I think it was 25. Maybe I still had it. I think it's 25 things that you thought were true that aren't.
Okay. Like if you were to swipe past that, let's say you didn't click on it. Like, do your palms get sweaty? Like, do you get an itch? Like, do you start to like keel over? Like, describe us the feeling. Like, what is it about clickbait that like you just cannot say no to it?
You just scroll. Like, do you ever, maybe I'm the only one, just like when I'm should be trying to sleep and I can't sleep and I'm wondering why because I'm staring at my phone.
Okay.
And do you just ever scroll for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling like through your Facebook feed or whatever?
Interesting. What I notice is that if I'm not getting good content or finding things, I usually switch to the next app.
Oh, see, I'm of that age. Like I have Instagram, I look at Instagram. Like Facebook is really the only one I use.
Okay.
So I will keep scrolling, and then because so much of the posts are just stupid and boring and not interesting and whatever.
Okay.
And then even I think most of the ones we respond to are pictures, that they're good pictures or not. But if it's a good picture of somebody and their kid or some kid playing a sport or whatever, you're like, oh, it's a good picture, but there's nothing beyond that.
Okay.
So then when I get to something like this, then I'm like, this is gold for me. And I
meat on that bone.
There is. There's such a, I don't know, maybe it's just more of a stupid curiosity.
Is there like ended open questions, lists, rankings? Like what is it? Typically when you come in, the ones that I've noticed is like if there's a ranking or if it's like, remember such and such, guess what they're doing now? Those are the ones that you typically
I love the where are they now.
Okay.
I just love that they're almost tabloidal. Like abandoned towns. I've clicked on those. Abandoned buildings from like the old ghost towns and stuff like that. And I'll never forget when I went through one of them, and Centralia was one of them. It was like, abandoned towns in the United States, and I'm scrolling through, and a lot of them are like, it was a gold rush town it was an oil rush town and the things dried up. And then I hit Centralia and I was like, I've been there. So I felt so worldly. I love the ones that like actors and actresses who were like co-stars who hated each other.
Okay.
Those always intrigue me. Anything like from a movie that I've seen, that like things you didn't know about Forrest Gump, stuff like that. People who allegedly were sex scenes that were real scenes on camera and things. If it probably fit in the Inquirer, I am all over. But this one I thought was just pure academic.
So the funny thing is, like, a lot of the stuff you just said are stuff that like I would be interested in. I guess clickbait just like is not the format in which I look.
How else do you get it?
I just like YouTube videos, documentaries. Like, and again, I'm not saying one's better or the other, even though in this case I do think one's better than the other. But I guess what I'm like, I've never thought like, oh, abandoned house. Like a lot of times, this is what'll happen in my life. I will see something clickbaity and I'll be like, oh, that's really interesting. And then I will go look for it on a different,
because the
I'll
clickbait,
Google it or I'll YouTube it, because like, I'm just like, I'm not going to click on this thing. Like I'm not doing it.
Oh, so you're too intellectually elitist for that article. You need a better article.
My biggest pet peeve with the clickbait, and I'm sure you run into this all the time, is when it slides. So like instead of just giving you like the full story or the full pictures or videos, it's like, here's slide number 1 and here's slide number 2. And they make you keep changing pages to get where you want to go.
Yeah, I don't love those because they're obviously just trying to throw more ads. I don't like the ones of, you know, which Happy Days stars actually had an affair during the show. And then they go, well, let's start with this. And they go through all the characters. Yeah. And you're scrolling for 10 minutes trying to get to the punchline. Yeah. And then at the end, you're like, oh, there was no one. Yeah. So those are the ones I've learned that like you get halfway through it and I'm like, I'm not finished. I'm not wasting my time because this could be 15 more minutes trying to find one story.
And see, the next step is just not clicking it.
Well, yes.
That's the next stage.
But like, if you come across, I don't understand how people, if depending on what your genre is, like say there was one, 10 rock stars who hated their biggest hit.
Okay.
How do you not click on that? I don't understand how people be like, yeah, it doesn't really.
I'm just, like I said, I'm just so wary of, it's very rarely in clickbait does it end up becoming something I actually wanted to read.
Well, let me tell you what I read last night.
Okay.
That penguins, because what do we know about penguins?
They can't fly.
Right.
I know that they mate for life. I know that they're excellent swimmers. I know there's this whole pebble ceremony thing with some of them.
Yeah, I saw that.
They're actually like incredible migrators.
Yes, they are. Do you know why they're good swimmers? Do you know what's different about their bodies as opposed to most birds?
I always assumed that their feathers were like more down than.
I'm sure there's a swimsuit effect to that it doesn't absorb their bones are not hollow like birds. So it adds to the density so they can, because birds have hollow bones. That's what makes them lighter and they can fly. Right. Yes, they do not have hollow bones. But one of the things you said, penguins are not as monogamous as we have been led to believe. They usually mate for the season.
Okay.
There are a whole bunch of different types of penguins.
Okay.
There's one called a chin strap because there's something that looks like, and they are very, the likelihood of mating with the same mate from season to season, some of them are as high as 80 and 90%.
Okay.
Which is crazy for the animal kingdom.
Sure.
The emperor penguin, which is like Happy Feet, and the most famous is only like 15%.
Okay.
And lots of even the monogamous ones, because you talk about the migration, and when they return, if the male doesn't return quick, if the female's there waiting, she don't wait very long.
Yeah. Mother Nature's not going to pass up something else.
That's what I learned. But this is actually the funny aspect. And where did I click on this? So I'm reading about penguins. That's not it. This is it. Okay. So this article, which is in Penguins International. So it's called Myths of Monogamy.
Okay.
Okay. So it starts with humans as they're doing this article is on monogamy, and they're covering humans in Penguins International. So they studied, as believed, it has been suggested that few human societies are monogamous, despite what many of us like to believe. For example, of the 1,231 societies reviewed in one study, I'm guessing this is historical societies. I can't believe
And just to clarify, these are human societies.
Human societies. Okay. 1,231 human societies studied. How many do you think were monogamous?
Like, you want me to give you the percentage?
Just a number of 1,200.
I'm going to assume it's like a larger span of time, like through history. Half? I would guess half.
186. 15% roughly.
Okay.
Of the ones that are either, the word is, it's not polygamy, polygyny. The ones that were occasionally polygyny and ones that were frequently polygyny, which means the man had multiple wives, out of 1,231 was 1,041. So somewhere like 80% of societies, historically, the man has had multiple wives.
Okay.
How many societies studied do you think did the woman have multiple husbands out of 1,231?
I don't even have a great guess. Hold on, give me 10 seconds. You're saying that men, it was 80% of the time that men had multiple wives.
Yes,
multiple
1,041 out of 1,231. Okay. The man had multiple wives at some point, at the same time, not widow.
Right. And it's safe to assume they were multiple mates because they may not have had ceremonies or actual marriage. But I would, because either way would be surprising. You could surprise me saying it's equal, or you could surprise me saying it's almost nothing. I'm going to say it's a lot less. I'm going to say it's very minimal. 4%.
No, just 4.
4 total.
Out of 1,231. So the men throughout history were allowed to have multiple wives. So when women talk about societal double standards and how they have historically gotten the short straw.
Sure.
4.
So scientifically, because I want to have fun with this topic here, scientifically speaking, there must be a caretaker driven aspect to that, right? Like, when you marry, mate, whatever the word is, through that historical span, when that happens, the outcome typically is an offspring, and typically one person ended up becoming the dependent, and that person was typically the pregnant lady. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
So wouldn't that have something to do, like, it's hard to go around spreading love and joy in your seed if you're having to take care of this little one.
Well,
whereas for men, it's, how much of a responsibility did they take on through that? So
that's part of it.
I'm still shocked, though, that it's that
4.
low. I would have thought that there were some. Here's what I would have thought. I would have thought that coming up through the early stages, that there had to be societies where the only goal was to just procreate. Like, this is survival.
But that's why, and that's why men were allowed to have so many.
But wouldn't you think that women would have been on the same?
But women can, once they're pregnant, they're pregnant.
Yes.
But a guy can have 15 girls pregnant at the same time. A woman can only be pregnant. One of the other things, I learned this in a sociology class at college, and they talked about the Mormons going west and the polygamy of that. That historically speaking, it was easier for women to survive than men, because men were the hunters, men were the warriors. So there was, and while the men were off, you watch Gladiator, when these guys were on crusades and stuff for years. Mm-hmm. So whoever the men were in the village had to take care of lots of things, not just romantically, but so it would be like one guy would take care of these people, whether he was farming, whether he was doing whatever.
Yeah.
And lots of the husbands didn't come home, whether they were killed in battle or killed by disease in battle and all that stuff.
So here would be my question, like the 2021 question. shouldn't the divorce rate be higher?
What's high?
Is it? I understand, but like as high as it is, wouldn't science say that the divorce rate should be higher than what it is? If the idea,
well, if you couple divorce with monogamy, then probably.
Yeah.
But if you see their study, because this is one thing, as I deep dived into this to go through, and I've read all this other stuff before. I'll give you this question: what percentage of divorces do you think are filed by men?
I would guess there's a number of reasons why I would guess it's lower than women.
What are those reasons? Off the top of your head.
I would argue they're worse at paperwork. They're able. So
you think it's logistic?
I think some of it's like, you laugh, but some of it is just like, yes, like they're less organized. They're less. The other thing too, like I think a guy is much more likely to just avoid the situation than a woman is. I think in most cases, a guy can just kind of like
tune it out and
dumb it down, just try to get through it.
You are very astute, Jeff Everett.
Go ahead.
70% are filed by women.
Yeah.
And
that makes
and the reasons are, they didn't do any about paperwork, but it was like lack of emotional commitment. Women feel like they're held back more because they get stuck taking care of the kids while the men are off doing their things.
Absolutely.
And, so yes, 70% are filed by women. So
yes, that doesn't shock me at all.
But there's also a high percentage of the number of, I say a high, like, and I didn't Google this, I read this years ago, but the number of marriages that survive infidelity is way higher than you would think. Now, I don't know if they survive forever, but it's like,
it was
in the 50%-ish.
Is it infidelity or knowing there's infidelity?
Yes.
Because that would be a very key.
Of knowing, I assume, I just read the headline, but it was, because when people get into this and it's, you've got kids, you've got finances tied up, you've got businesses tied, you've got all this, that I think more, because when you're a kid and you're a teenager, you're like, if my spouse ever cheated on me, then, but when you get to adult life and it's so complicated and and then you kind of, if you do the counseling and not the counseling always works, but if you delve into like why, it's not what they did, but why they did. And once people get into it, that now I don't know a study of if they survived infidelity once and they reconciled, does it rear its ugly head again, or do they live happily ever after? That would be an interesting question.
There's also some, and I want to make sure I say this correctly because I don't have the source in front of me. There's also significant differences between divorce rates based off of population. People that grew up in smaller towns are significantly less likely to get divorced than people who grew up in larger areas.
I never knew that.
Yes. The thing that I read said part of it is lack of choice. So there is this fear of like, well, if I get divorced or if I leave them, like, how would I find somebody else, or what would I do without them? There's also this idea that most people in smaller populations end up marrying people they've grown up with their whole life. So there's also that connection of, I don't want to say like they've never gone out on their own and like, but there's this idea of I'm bonded to this. This is all I've ever known, and I'm going to get through this no matter what. So if you actually look at divorce rates based off population, they vary significantly depending on how low or how high your population is.
That's interesting. I also wonder too if it's somebody that you at least grew up with. Maybe they weren't exactly in your grade, but someone that you've known for a long time, you
stomach more of what they
do. And you have a better background. You know what their family's like. You know what they've been through, and it's as opposed to you meet someone in college, and hey, you don't know anything. Right. You know what they tell you, but you don't know anything. So, that would be.
It's interesting.
That is an interesting I never thought about. I do know that I think they also marry younger in smaller populations than than they do in larger metropolitan areas, and that even goes with education level. The more education people receive, the more they put off marriage. Sure. People who go right into the workforce usually marry earlier, younger.
Oh yeah, good one.
That wasn't even recent clickbait. Oh, remind me, I have more clickbait info when we get to the Viking story.
Well, I was about to ask you. Oh. So I actually was looking up a lot of the January 6th insurrection stuff is going through the process right now in court. And one of the people that was brought up was Jacob Chansley. He was called the QAnon shaman.
He was the Viking.
I think he was the QAnon shaman. He is right now. They're trying to, they're going through a procedure of what he should be handed. He's asking to be done. He's been in jail, and he's asking that the time he has already served be his sentence for what happened on January 6th. The other side is saying they're asking for 51 months after processing.
And so if it happened in January, what do you figure he went in March? He's probably been in jail 8 months.
I would argue he's been in custody at least 8 months, I would guess. That's a guess. But as we're going through it, obviously he is known because he had a spear. He had the Viking kind of helmet with the horns.
He dressed to the nines.
He was ready to go. But I mentioned it, and you said, "Oh, I have a good Viking one as well."
Well, same thing. Yeah. Little known facts. They did not wear the horn heads. That came along later. They think it might have been an opera, or it's a theatrical edition that now is stuck, because even the Minnesota Vikings have those horn things on their helmets. So when you think of a Viking, that's what you think of, but apparently that's not true.
Well, there's no way that I guess it could have been seen as imposing, because I was going to say functionally, there's no way it works for him.
You could hang your keys on it.
Yes, you could. There's always some things that I relate to that. What was the old comic strip with the Vikings? And they used to wear the helmets like this. Do you remember this?
Was it Hagar the Horrible?
Yes, it was. That is always, whenever I see those hats or those helmets, that is where my brain goes to.
I feel like I was just at trivia. I ripped that one right off.
Yeah,
I have not read Hagar the Horrible in 20 years.
Well, you know what's fun? So when I was younger, I would go through the comic strips, and some of them are over your head. I never understood Family Circus. Like when I was a kid, and I just didn't, the family dynamic, and I was so over top of where I was mentally. But then there's other ones, like I thought Garfield was just the greatest. And Haggard the Horrible was one where I laughed every time. Like the humor just landed with 9-year-old me. Like I just understood it. So I've always, for whatever reason, when I see those hats, that's what I think of. There is... How much do you know about Vikings? Have you ever really deep dived into it?
I know Dallas just beat them on Sunday night at home with a backup quarterback.
Yes, they did. There's this whole new school of theory on Vikings, and that they actually were more like pirates than Vikings. So when you think of a Viking, you don't really think of them as seafarers, right? You don't picture them on a pirate ship, conquering the seas and everything else. But they've actually said that Vikings were just colder, burlier pirates. And that's more of the logic they believe behind.
Well, what I'd heard is that they just went around and raped and pillaged and took the women.
Yes, but how they did, I think for most people, it was they were on these rugged terrains, and they walked across it.
The Viking ship.
Reality,
I always pictured boats.
Okay, and so there's this lost misconception between Vikings and pirates, where they're actually kind of cousins.
But you're right. A pirate you just have this tropical setting.
Aspect to it.
Yeah.
And here these Vikings were basically burly pirates.
One of the other things I read, and I don't know if this is true, and this throws off Jurassic Park very much, but they think a lot of dinosaurs had feathers, and not that they weren't like lizard scales, they were feathers.
Yes. So this is crazy. So one of my favorite, because this is a perfect show today, because we're just bouncing around. So if you go on TikTok or Instagram, there's this one account, I'm forgetting the name of it, where what they do is they show you bones of an animal today. Okay. And then what they'll do is they'll ask a Imagineer, right? Somebody who, when they dig up the fossils of these dinosaurs and they try to piece it back together and everything else. So they'll give them bones of a raccoon, and they'll ask them digitally draw what this would have looked like and animate everything else. And the results are so far off, like they're not even close. It almost makes you wonder if, like, there's no way we'll ever actually know what the dinosaurs looked like. And you know this because when we take what we have today and you don't tell them what it is, like you just give them the bones and it's so far off from the actual animal itself. Whatever our representation of dinosaurs are right now, it is most likely not even really close to what actually happened. Feathers or no feathers, we're not even close. One of the best one was they took a bison. And what they realized was
a Bucknell bison?
It could have been the Bucknell bison. So they took the bones, put it back together. They took a Stegosaurus. That's the one with like the scales.
Okay.
It almost had like the fan, like the sail on the back of it. Well, if you look at the two bones of a bison and that, they're like identical. So if you put together the bison, if you would have done it then, a bison would have like a sail on it.
Right.
It would look like a horse with a sail instead of like a bison. So even that, like they're now questioning, like no dinosaur probably had like a sail like on the back of it.
Yeah. Somewhere along the line, somebody had to draw the first one.
Yes.
And then it just stuck.
And I'm not like, they had to make their best guess. Like they had nothing to go off of. Like they made the best.
Well, and then you can understand why it went through history. And then there's people like, it's probably not like that, but it's ingrained in everyone's mind. Yes. It's just like you go into a church and they have a painting of Jesus.
Yeah, right.
And they're like, Jesus was from the Middle East.
Right.
This is not what people look like in the Middle East.
Correct.
But he's very fair skinned. He has light hair. But somewhere someone made an early artist rendition of Jesus to the Western world, and it's just kind of gone on.
Yeah, and that's what it looked like.
Because they don't have photographs, so they made their drawing, and this one stuck.
It's very, very true. Did you like dinosaurs growing up? Like, was that a thing for you?
Yeah, I thought they were cool. I think to the world, like Jurassic Park was really to, modern society. That is when we talk about dinosaurs, we picture Jeff Goldblum and Jurassic Park and Newman, who was only in the first one because he got killed off. But
yes, spoiler alert.
If you haven't seen the first Jurassic Park, yes, I ruined it for you. Yeah. Samuel L. Jackson's very underrated in that movie.
Yes.
What an unbelievable. It's been on HBO a lot lately.
They have the whole thing. Well, so it's their not their project, but it's their entity, right? Like they own it now.
Okay.
So HBO Max just keeps them on.
And all the other ones suck. And to different degrees of suck.
There was the second one was pretty bad. The
third one I thought was borderline unwatchable.
Was that the one where he came back? Jurassic Park 3?
Jurassic Park 3 is the one where they found the phone like 3 days later and saw the battery and they got stuck. And
okay, you didn't enjoy that one.
I thought it was awful. Awful.
Now the recent ones with Chris Pratt have been enjoyable.
Have they?
Yeah.
You
didn't love them?
No.
Really?
It was one of those that like they've waited so long to put this back out. It has to be good. And I was just like,
I enjoyed them.
I think they're very Pirates of the Caribbean-ish.
This is okay. So this is the first part. This was not originally a script. This was a Michael Crichton book.
Michael
Crichton book. And so just like when you have a best-selling book and you have like a basis to go off of, it's very easy to make the first movie. It gets harder to do that when you no longer have like the basis of what you are going off of. They found that the Harry Potter stuff, they found that out. They knocked out the Harry Potter books and then they tried to go back to this like Fantastic Beasts and it's hard. Like it's not easy.
But I know with Harry Potter, because I've seen all the movies, I didn't read any of the books, but like the second, my favorite one is the one with Sirius Black, which one is that?
Well, there's multiple with Sirius Black where he comes back. Like he, whether it's like a reflection or a dream or anything else, there's a lot of them.
But if someone told me, someone will chime in. But that's my favorite. But yeah, they didn't get worse. But like the Pirates of the Caribbean, the first one is iconic, and the other ones were okay, but they just weren't nearly as good. At least I didn't think so.
I agree with your sentiment that it gets harder to redo these things. But the Jurassic Park with the Chris Pratt comeback, that first one back, I thought they did very, very well.
That was okay.
Yeah.
And I know, but like Star Wars, most people say Empire was better. The first Rocky was really good, but Rocky 3 was really good, right?
Sure.
You know, so it's I don't know. I think those are the two movie franchises that I think the first one was great, and then they dropped off considerably after that, were Pirates and Jurassic Park.
Let's talk about the headline of the day today.
This is great.
So this is a story in Vice News. So it's estimated Denmark spends about $150,000 a year to clean their beach of seaweed and plastic. When asked what they do with it at a recent panel, they said they then take it out to sea and dump it. So the practice was described by experts as completely idiotic. I don't even know. I mean, I guess if you're thinking like it's been a rough couple of months, it could be worse. You could be in charge of the Denmark beaches.
So the stuff washes up on the beach.
Correct.
So the way they clean it up is to clean it up, take it back out to the ocean, dump it again, so it can then re-wash up on the beach.
Correct.
And when the experts around you say your system is, quote, completely idiotic, that really, there are people that are looking for new jobs today.
I would hope so. $150,000.
That's not really all that much.
But see, like in Denmark, if you equated $150,000 to Denmark, what do you think that would come out to, like, for the United States? Like, I bet you it's a substantial chunk of change in Denmark.
Maybe. You may be right, but I don't know. It is the fact that your colleague says, by the way, your plan is completely idiotic. They're like, what? We clean it up? We take it out there? I mean, this is the equivalent of cleaning your room by just shoving everything under the bed.
There is, I think the other part of this too that it shows is there are people that, like, now people would lose jobs. Like, people would lose because they have to, like, there's someone who runs a bulldozer, they come through, they clean it up. There's a boat that gets paid to take it out. There's a lot of people that, like, get a chunk of this $150,000. And if you just solve it, like, if you clean it up and then take it somewhere other than the sea, all of that chunk of change is gone. Whether you're the
you're gonna have
captain,
to do it again next year.
Yeah, but not like this.
Well, the seaweed. And maybe dumping seaweed back in the ocean, I don't know. I mean, obviously, it's a dead plant and it breaks down. Does it break down less in the water? I mean, obviously, I don't know how detrimental that is. Taking the plastic back out and dumping it in the ocean is not a good plan.
This sounds like a cycle that went on because financially, to get rid of it, people would have lost money. The guy driving the dozer would have lost his job. The captain working the boat would have lost the paycheck.
I think it's easier.
You don't think so?
I think it's telling the kid, clean your room. They pick all the stuff, they jam it in the closet, they slam the door real quick before it can fall out, and the room looks clean.
I mean, are Denmark beaches a thing? Like, is that like?
Apparently, they're not a good thing.
Like, I'm sincerely, like, I don't know. Like, I didn't.
Isn't Denmark way north? That, like, one of the things that I learned having my ex-mother-in-law is British. So I have relatives, friends, whatever, that live in England. And one of the things they talked about in the U.S. is how spoiled we are, because they're like, you don't ever have to leave your country to do it. If you want to go skiing, if you want to go to the beaches, you want to go to the mountains, you have everything in your country. Like, England is so far north. England is kind of equidistant from Maine. Okay. So when they want to go to the beach, that's why they go to the south of Spain, because it's far enough south.
Sure.
So when you get to like Denmark, I'm not sure exactly where Denmark is. This is my European geography. It's probably so far north, it's too cold.
So according to Google, which knows everything, I guess, because of the Nordic weather, the Danish swimming season is short, and most beaches only have lifeguards from late June to mid-August. Their tourism site says, however, visitors can enjoy a windy walk along the beaches here at any time of the year, or go sailing on the open water as a Danish passion since Viking times. So this, I mean, to me, that only makes it worse, because you're essentially $150,000 for a month and a half beach season.
Right. So their season is that short.
And now, you still don't
you can enjoy, though.
You don't think anybody's pockets are being lined. Still.
It's only $150,000.
But in Denmark, 150. Listen, I'm not saying Denmark's poor. I'm just saying the overall economy of Denmark is less, and thus $150,000 has to be substantially more.
I don't know about that.
Has to be more.
What's their average national? I bet Denmark does just fine.
I'm not. That's not my argument. My argument is that in our head, 150,000. Like we could walk out the street right now and find someone that makes $150,000. So to us, it's like, it's $150,000. If you're in Denmark, I would imagine that $150,000 out of the budget might matter more than it does here.
It might, but I don't necessarily.
You don't think so?
I don't necessarily think that's the case. I just like how they keep the beaches open for a windy walk.
For a windy walk.
Nothing like a windy walk along the beach.
I mean, from June to mid-August. So do you think they're only doing this once a year? Like, how often do you?
Probably.
If you only have a month and a half beach season. If anybody's from Denmark, let us know.
I mean,
we'd love to talk. We'd love to talk to you.
And as we joke about this,
Chris brought up a good point. Denmark is socialized.
Huh.
So maybe they wouldn't be lining anybody's pocket. Maybe they would be lining.
But like our swimming pool season, is generally mid-June to mid-August.
Like in North Central Pennsylvania.
Right here,
yeah. You think we only have a month and a half swimming season?
I mean, you get in earlier, but sometimes June. Sometimes we don't get really hot until like the middle of June. You'll have a day here and a day there, but it's not like June 2nd. It's 88 degrees.
Interesting. I always thought pool season was like Memorial Day to Labor Day.
It is basically. But I've also, from experience from someone who grew up with a pool, by the end of July, once it starts 80 degrees in May, feels a lot different than 80 degrees at the end of August.
Okay.
So by the time you get into July when it's really hot and you want to swim, and then it goes from really hot to just kind of hot. And now all of a sudden you're like, I don't want to jump in the pool. It's not that hot out.
Yeah.
Because it's only 80, it's 78, it's 81. It's warm enough that you can.
Okay.
But it's not hot enough that you feel like, this is on the day's activity.
Can we talk about that real quick? I might be having a pool. Am I going to love this? Am I going to hate this? What's your 30-second synopsis on a pool?
It is great for it will be great. Unless there's some hidden maintenance issue that if there's leaking or something. Sure. But when it gets to the point when the kids get older, there is that teenage year where the kids don't swim that much.
Right.
The teenage years where the kids don't swim that much. And then you're just kind of maintaining it and they're not using it that much.
Okay.
But when you're single before you have kids, you can use it whenever you want. You can have people over, you can do whatever. And when the kids are young, they want to swim all the time because it's one thing you can do and it's easy and they like it. It's fun.
Okay.
So for the most part, yes, you'll like it. When you get older, that's when it might just be more hassle than it's worth.
Okay. The other thing everyone's doing, they're all going to these saltwater pools.
Yes.
Can you give the 10-second? What's the breakdown on that?
Apparently,
it's less chemicals.
It's
right?
less chemicals.
Okay.
If it works well, it's cheaper. We have never gone to the saltwater because we've gone it the old way.
If I get a saltwater, if it's a saltwater pool, is it better for me or is it better for the pool? Who's
I would suspect it's better for your wallet, is what I think.
Okay.
I just think they found it's another way that they can filtrate it. Because initially, when you think of saltwater, you think of the ocean. You can't open your eyes. You can't open your mouth. You can't. Not that you're drinking pool water, but when you get pool water in your mouth, you just spit it out. And it's not like, you get salt water in your mouth and you're like, pip, pip, pip.
Right.
So I would suspect I don't know if I've ever knowingly swam in a saltwater pool, but I would suspect you can open your eyes underwater. But most new systems, I don't even know if they put in new systems that aren't saltwater anymore for the most part. I think it is predominantly that's the way the world's gone.
Okay. Thank you. Sportsmanship. Let's talk. So can we, by the way, did you see they handed out suspensions and fines
for Jokic?
For Jokic and Morris.
I always call it Jokic.
No, because it all works. It all works.
No, I did not see.
So if you didn't see this, there was a fight between the Nuggets and Heat. It was between the reigning NBA MVP. So not just some schmuck. The reigning NBA MVP got kind of decked in the ribs when the game was clearly over. There was
cheap
like 2
shot.
minutes
Total
left.
cheap shot.
2 minutes left, up like 15. Game was over. Guy at half court, like kind of like elbows him up in his ribs, but he has his momentum going with it. It wasn't like he was just standing there. Like he was going full speed, like into him. And immediately after he does it, he turns around. Jokic kind of drops the ball, chases after him, forearm shiver into the back. Morris falls to the ground. Jawing ensues.
Morris may still be laying there. He's such a drama queen.
He might be. So they recently handed out Jokic is getting suspended for a game.
Okay.
It didn't list a fine, but I'm assuming if you're suspended for the game,
you
don't get
game
paid
check.
For the game.
Yes.
So, okay. Morris was fined, I want to say $50K. I'm going to look it up here in a second when you start talking. And then Jimmy Butler was fined very minimal, I guess, for trying to like instigate it, trying to keep it going. I vehemently disagree.
Morris didn't get any games.
No. I vehemently disagree with what happened as far as like handing down the suspensions and the fines.
And I don't think society is going to agree with it. I don't think the NBA players are going to agree with it.
It was interesting. The part about it is, I mean, everyone's like, they were both wrong. And I guess this is where we can get into like the sportsmanship conversation. At that point, everyone's like, well, Jokic shouldn't retaliate. And I kind of disagree. I disagree only because it wasn't a hard foul. It was a cheap foul.
I agree.
And so if you're going to give a cheap foul and then turn around and walk away as if like you didn't mean anything by it, like nothing happened, once you give the cheap foul, like if you're not like ready to go, like I can't, that's your own problem.
Well, yes, the whole he shouldn't have retaliated, I guess, but the whole like they're both equally wrong. If I walk over and punch you in the face and then you punch me back, I'm more wrong than you are.
I agree.
There's no doubt about that. So I don't understand why. Yeah, and when you watch the play, it is he tried to disguise it. Like Morris did not run over and punch him. It is a dirty play, but he tried to do it in a way that like, I'm not going to get in trouble, but it's clearly dirty. So
I told you yesterday, the biggest issue right now is that people are like, well, Jokic did it unsuspectedly, like his back was turned. And my biggest argument to that is Jokic did not know he was going to get shot.
So did Morris. Morris did it unsuspected.
Yes, like when Jokic was coming down the floor, it's a 2-minute game with up 15. Like there's no chance he's thinking this guy is about to try to like crack my ribs. Like he's not going to try to do this. Sure enough, he does it. And so at that point, there's no difference to me between what Morris and Jokic did. The only difference is Morris instigated it.
I agree.
And somehow Jokic gets suspended a game. It makes no sense to me. But it comes back to the idea of like, what is sportsmanship?
I assume he appealed, right?
I'm assuming he's going to appeal. I haven't seen it yet, but it comes like you brought up sportsmanship, and I know you have a story here eventually to tell. I don't understand how this demonstrated. It feels like sportsmanship did not come into the equation when they were deciding these punishments.
Yeah, I think they decided that punishment just because the shot that Jokic took was so much more. Like he hit him hard, and he dropped him. And I think they've just, one was a bigger explosion.
It might have been Richard Jefferson. I forget who it was, but they brought up the good point. If Jokic would have fell to the ground after Morris hit him, Morris would have gotten a 1-game suspension.
Probably.
But because Jokic is 7 foot tall.
He's so big and strong.
And here's he's from Serbia. He's not falling over. That dude's whole rib cage could have been shattered and he wasn't falling to the ground.
Mark, he got a boo-boo on his back and he couldn't walk off the floor.
And so because he doesn't flop, because he doesn't, all of a sudden now, he retaliates and now he's the bad guy because Morris, and listen, I'm not saying Morris wasn't not feeling great. I'm sure it did not feel great when Jokic forearm shivered him in the back. But this idea now that all of a sudden Jokic is now the worst person in this is insane.
Well, we got to this. We were talking about, my son, who's 15, is convinced that the NFL taunting rules are ruining the league. And for Steeler fans who watched the Steelers-Bears game, there was a huge call in the fourth quarter, and I can't remember the guy's name. I want to say he was number 59. He was a white linebacker for the Bears that sacked Ben on third down, forcing a punting situation. This guy, and I get the celebration. I get, people jump up, they high-five their teammates. They do their sack dances. We don't encourage white guys to do sack dances because they just don't work out as well. But there are celebrations that are acceptable.
Right.
He turned and walked towards the other bench about 7 or 8 or 9 steps. He didn't yell one thing. He didn't turn, yell, hey, whatever, and then turn and go. He walked all the way over, stopped and stared at him, and then turned and walked back the other way. And they called for taunting. And my son thinks it's a terrible idea. And teenage boys think it's a terrible idea because you made the play. And I said to him, listen, he said, so if you hit a home run, you can't bat flip. I was like, no, of course you can bat flip. But if you walk down to first base and stare into the first base dugout the whole time, then the next time you're up, they're going to put one in your ear hole.
Right.
If you score a goal in the NHL and just go skate over and stand in front of the other bench and stare at it, they will literally decapitate you with a stick on the next shift. Like so there's an aspect of celebration, but the celebrating of like telling the other team how good you are and how bad they suck, I just don't get it.
There is, because I want to dive into this about football. There's something about the end zone that is very unique than any other sport. And so what I mean by that is when you score in the end zone, like in basketball, if you score, even though the field is shaped the same way and the benches are on the side, even when you score, the game does not stop.
The game's still going.
Right. Most of the time. So there is no, now and ones are different and all that stuff. The other thing about it is when you score in the end zone, the majority of the action is not in the end zone. So you have this moment in time where you feel like you can celebrate, taunt, however you want to describe it, with very little repercussion. Like you're not gloating in someone's face. They're over there. There are teams all the way. Football opens itself up to, I have less of a problem with it in football than any other sport, just because of the way the sport is structured and the way the field in the end zone is. I'm pro, do what you want. I don't care. Here, and this is the other part I always come back to. People don't like the Curry shimmy in basketball. In hockey, a lot of times, like they don't like it. Like they used to ride the pony and they used to do stuff like that. And they you are a professional and you're getting paid. Stop them. Stop them.
Well, but
don't
it's not
stop
that.
Stop them.
That, but
they're not like, now here's the thing. If they're making fun of your race, your gender, your right, like if they are verbally harassing you outside of the sport, I totally against it. Everything else, like if you want to tell them they're awful, go for it. Like they get paid to do this.
And they do that. They do that in close quarters the whole time.
Stop them. Just stop them.
Then here's my question.
Stop them.
So what you're saying is stop them?
Yes.
So here's my question. And this is the psychology question for everyone. What makes it for this guy? And my son's like, listen, it could have been his first NFL sack. I'm like, great. Then high five your teammate. Then run to the bench. Sure. Everyone on the bench, they will lift you up and carry you around because it's third down and you just forced a punt.
Sure.
What is it in the mentality of them that having success and doing their job well for the good of the team isn't enough? That now I have to strut around and puff out my tail feathers and
so I think football, again, football's so unique with this. The monies go to quarterback. Like it is what it is. The money goes to the quarterback. There's so much up for grabs now. Sponsorship dollars, shoe deals, jersey sales, all these different things. And here's the other part of it too. Like there's so many guys now trying to make it in the league, like trying to make something happen. And this is true. Like I truly believe this. Let's say like it's a late preseason game and I'm some defensive end and I'm trying to make a roster and I get fortunate enough to make a sack on like the second to last play. You better believe I'm going to make sure that
everybody knows it was you.
Everybody. Everybody. And so here, this is the point. This is the point that I would get to. And it's not excusing sportsmanship. Like, I'm not saying that sportsmanship has to take a back seat to this stuff. There's an aspect to this stuff that people want to act as if these people don't get paid to do this. Their livelihoods aren't determined on their success. And not only that, the added benefits of what comes along with being a professional athlete, with sponsorship dollars and everything else, really just comes down to, like, visually, did somebody see you and they go, oh, that guy. That's the name of the game. And so would I love it if the world was like this perfect sphere where everybody just like, oh, it's for the team and that sack, I did that for you guys. But that's just not the world that we've created. It's not real.
And that would be a boring world. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
What I love about this guy is, again, and this happens all the time in the NFL, he makes the sack, he walks well out of his way towards the other bench,
right,
talks, then turns around, runs all the way back over, then he gets flagged, and he's on the bench going, what did I do? And that's the part that cracks me up.
Sure.
Like, if you're really, you have no idea what you did?
I agree with you in this sense. In football, you can probably celebrate and taunt without ever actually coming within 20 yards of somebody on the opposite team.
I mean, most sacks, they get up, they walk, and there's nobody around them. You're right. There's nobody around.
And then, like, it's always on the other side of the field when you like it. So there, if you get called for a taunting penalty in the NFL, you are probably seeking it out. Like, you've probably abandoned the idea that, like, oh, I care too much to get a flag here, so I'm gonna like wait to do this, or I'm gonna. But for the most part, I always go back to this. When you look at what these guys had to do to get to where they are, and everyone's like, well, you know, how many guys are 6'3", 350 pounds and run like a 5-second 40? That's not the point. Like, for the majority of people, they spent their whole life trying to become the best at something. And then not only like the best at something where like you sat at the computer and you typed, and it was the best at something and where like the goal is to beat the person across from you every day when you show up. And so like the idea that they're supposed to just rein it in now, like when they finally accomplish.
That's what being an adult is. You're supposed to rein it in.
I disagree though, because like we ask these people to do something different than what the average adult does. We don't ask these people to show up in a quarter zip and sit at a desk. We ask these people to like physically perform acts that are almost impossible. And then when they achieve them, we're supposed to just be like, good, feel good for yourself, but don't do anything. Like, don't like, it's like, no, they're going to react. Like, they're going to do things.
But don't react like a prick. Like, react like
why do you or I get to sit here? Like, going back to Jokic thing, what he did was wrong, but I'm not going to say he's a prick. Why do I get to decide how he should have reacted? And I feel the same way. Like, if an NFL player gets a sack, I'm not going to sit here and say like, well, listen, like, he had to go through all these challenges and he had to do this, and maybe he just finally got the contract he wanted and everything's fallen into place. And like, I'm not going to sit there and be like, but don't celebrate it the way you want to. Like, I'm not doing that.
So there's a difference though between if you hit a home run in Major League Baseball and you go around and you high five the first base coach and you high five the third base coach, like that's perfectly acceptable celebration. Even if you want to give the Kirk Gibson, you know, whatever, people point to the sky, I get all that. But if you run around the bases and you give the middle finger to the first baseman, the second baseman, the shortstop, the third baseman, like, that's not an acceptable celebration.
I agree with that. But that's because now you're going like kind of what I hinted at before, right? When I talked about like verbal harassment, like on a different scale. If the middle finger is like, I don't know, how would you describe that harassment? Because it's not
timeless. Would that be
timeless? But you get my point. Like, there's
universal.
I think too many times we just expect these people to just like rev up, and then in the moment of absolute bliss, like rev it down, and like it's just not real.
Well, and I get that. I totally get that.
Work.
But the thing is like there's lots of people's bliss that is with their teammates and in the end zone and high fives and jumping around and wearing the turnover chain and doing all this. There's so many end zone celebrations now in the NFL that you can tell are predetermined and orchestrated. Like, when we get a pick six and we do this, we're all going to do this, and we're going to take a group photo and all this. So what doesn't register in my mind is where someone's celebration has to be to tell everyone else on the other team how much better I am than you.
Because they did it.
But everybody knows they did it because they just saw them do it.
And he's just making sure you know for the next time. I get your sentiment. I will bring this up because I think this is a fair discussion. There are a lot of people who don't like the Stephen Curry shimmy. Do you know what I'm referring to? So for those at home who don't, Stephen Curry will make a shot.
I think I originated it.
You might have. Stephen Curry will make a shot and he will kind of like swivel and like move his, and there are a lot of people who say like essentially it's like a different way of giving the middle finger. Like you're basically being like, ha, ha, ha.
It's like one you can show on TV.
There's nothing, like there's nothing you can do about this. Like, ha, ha, ha. And what I would say to most people, like to me, him hitting the shot, turning around, not watching it go in the basket, shimmying down the court is way more disrespectful to me than him just turning and looking at me and just being like, boy, you suck.
You think?
Way more.
I disagree.
Way
now,
more.
I will say
this is the difference. If he turns to me and says, man, you suck, he's basically admitting that I am a part of what we are doing. Like we are in competition and I am a part of this. When he hits a three on you, turns, looks at the crowd before the ball is even in the basket and is shimmying down the floor, he's basically saying, this is my show and you are not a part of it.
You aren't.
Okay, but see, that's more disrespectful than the other one.
I disagree. I think that's more insane. But I will say this, and you told me this because you played Division II college basketball. You said there is so much more talking on the floor than you would ever imagine.
So much more. People have and again, like I played at like a state school Division II. If you go to like a professional game or you go to like a high division, it is unbelievable what is actually being said between. I had games where like the entire game, the point guard and I were having a legitimate conversation just the entire game. Like don't do that. Like, oh, you don't do, like, if you can do, like, you're like, don't be late next time. Like just back and forth. People just don't, and see if you mic'd us, you'd be like, oh, those two little jerks. Like they're taunting each other the whole game. I don't know. I don't relate to it very well.
But see, this even goes further into after you told me about that. And basketball, because of the interwovenness, basketball lends itself to more talking than any other sport. Maybe soccer, hockey, but like baseball and football, just you're more separated and it doesn't, you're not constantly intermixed with the opponent like that. But that also lends to, I'm sure there's all kinds of talking in the NFL, but it can be done in a way that you don't go stand in front of the other bench and say, everybody, look at me, look at me, look at me. I just made one play in my career.
I think this is the other part of it too. In basketball, there is this idea in basketball, like you can get the ball if you need to get the ball. Like the best player can find the ball, right? In baseball, like if you're up at the plate, you are up at the plate. Like there's not a lot else.
And if you're not, you're not.
There's not a lot else going on. So like if you're the batter at the plate, you don't need to be like over here. Like what? Like that's same thing with the pitcher on the mound. It's like here.
I get that.
Football is different. You are so dependent on so many things happening for you to be able to make that play that you have dreamed about, wanted to make. I just think football is very different. I think the taunting and celebrating stuff in football, when they say like, well, I think to use any sport comparison to it is almost like unfair.
Well, my 15-year-old agrees with you.
Thank you.
He also thinks I'm a hypocrite from the standpoint, it drives me insane when MMA fighters like show great sportsmanship when they hug each other, when they talk, they raise each other's hands. And I was like, you literally just tried to choke the breath out of a guy for 15 minutes or 25 minutes. And now you're going to pretend that you like each other. Right. And maybe they do like each other. I don't know. And he says, how can you hate that sportsmanship?
Right.
But then you hate the fact that the Steeler guy, he's like, you're inconsistent. And maybe I am.
But isn't that the part of football that it's like the unspoken part of football is you're not just trying to tackle the person. The unwritten thing about football is like you want them to feel it. You want them, if they come
Right.
across the middle again, you want them thinking about you. Like, there's this deeper part of football that we just try to, like, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to act like we're trying to hurt people. We don't, but like, that is the reality of the sport.
Well, one of the other things that, and this will never happen, but from the top down, the people who make the rules should actually sit down with the players and show them some of these taunts and are like, is this worth a penalty? Is this worth a penalty?
But I would flip it. Because that's the weird part, is I would flip it. I would sit down with the people running the NFL, and I would be like, who was hurt? Like, who?
No, but
like,
I'm saying,
was your product better or worse because you guys had to stop the game here and throw that?
But no, this is what I'm saying. Like, if they ask the people, the stuffed suits who run the NCAA, and they mic'd you up, and you're having this running dialogue with the other team's point guard, and they're like, wow, is this acceptable? The stuffed shirts might say, well, of course not. That is not the sportsmanship. And you would, as a player, you'd be like, no, that's fine. We do that every game.
I'd be like, I shook his hand afterwards. Like,
so to ask the players what they think is egregious is probably the number is way, way less. There's probably them that they're like, that shouldn't be a foul. That shouldn't be. Okay, this guy, that should have been a foul. That was stupid.
Yes.
But so that the players should be brought into the conversation, and they never will be. And that's a problem.
It definitely is. Anything else before we have to head out?
Yes, tomorrow is Veterans Day.
Okay.
But today,
okay.
And I see this, I've learned this on Facebook, and just to clarify, tomorrow's Veterans Day. Today is the birthday of the Marine Corps, which each branch has its own birthday. And I don't know if you knew this. I knew this when I looked this up. The Army, the Navy, and the Marines were all formed officially within like 5 months of each other in 1775.
Say that one again. The Army,
the Army,
and the Marines.
The Navy. The Army was in the summer.
Okay.
The Navy was in the fall, and I guess we're still technically in the fall. Navy was like September, October, and then the Marines were formed today in 1775.
Interesting.
So it's like whenever this comes up, the Marines' birthday, and then the very next day is Veterans Day. Obviously, the Air Force was formed in, I want to say, the 1940s or 50s.
Okay.
I think it was actually right after World War II.
And the Space Force was January...
something like that.
2017? 2018? Why are you laughing?
I don't get the joke.
It's the Space Force.
What about it?
It's our fifth leg.
We have one?
Yes.
I thought you were kidding.
No, there's Space Force.
I don't... Is this a movie?
Well, I mean, it is a show, but there is actually like a legitimate Space Force.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that.
You did not know that.
I did not know that. But anyway, so happy birthday to the Marines today. And then tomorrow is... So if you see stuff on Facebook, you're like, oh, is today Veterans Day? No, it's tomorrow, but today's the Marines' birthday.
Let me look.
The Marine Corps.
Let me look up that's interesting. I did not know that they were all like created. I mean, when you piece it together, it makes sense.
It does
in
make sense.
1775 that they put that all together. Let me look up the Space Force because I want to make sure.
Not to be confused with the Great Space Coaster.
No, not at all.
See, you're too young for the Great. We're all Gnu's as good Gnu's with Gary Gnu.
No.
Joe Garrison just laughed at that.
It was founded on December. I just blanked on it. It was founded in 2019, December 20th, 2019. Headquarters, Pentagon, Arlington County, Virginia.
What do they do?
United States Space Force.
So you can enlist in the United States?
They have 6,434 personnel, 77 spacecraft.
So are these essentially military astronauts? Or can you go out of high school and enlist in the Space Force?
So the role is space security, combat power, projection, space mobility and logistics, information mobility. Space domain awareness is their exact role.
Huh.
The specialist, so the ranking, you can be a Space Force, hold on real quick. You can be a Specialist 1 or an E1. The higher you go, you can be a Senior Master Sergeant.
Please tell me that the highest
Force Elite.
That the highest is Jedi. Please tell me.
It is not. It is not Jedi.
You cannot be a Jedi?
No, you cannot be a Jedi. You can actually be a Chief Master Sergeant. You can also be a Command Chief Master Sergeant, which is an E9. And then there is one Chief Master Sergeant of the Space Force. That is the guy. The CMSSF.
That is Darth Vader.
That you think so?
Yeah.
And then you can sign up. Interested in joining the military? We can put you in touch with recruiters. Sign up now.
So that is sign upable.
Yeah. Oh,
that's not.
I'm not trying to be funny. Like, this is a real thing that the United States has started. And
so when you were I was wondering if there's like all these astronauts, and then these are like the Army Rangers of the astronaut.
This is again, I might be speaking out of turn. I don't think you technically have to be an astronaut to go to space. I think we've learned that in like the last 6 months. So like Space Force, like you don't. It's not like you're going to the moon. Technically.
No, I get it.
Like
I get what you're saying. I did not know that.
Yeah, it's the rare air above us that you're basically looking after.
Well, the other ones were founded in 1775. Not that.
Yeah, no, not the Space Force. All right.
Is Elon Musk on that one?
On the Space Force?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, okay. Just check. Did he solve world hunger yet?
See, and you thought Trump was useless. We got a United States Space Force.
No, Trump did a lot of things.
A lot of things. Thank you guys for watching the Midday Show. Thank you to all of our sponsors. And be sure to go to NorthcentralPa.com for all of your local news.
You know what I think Trump did more than anything else? He exemplified that America is tired of the old political machine.
Well said.
That they're like, America's like, maybe it's time we have an outsider that's not a lifetime politician. And I think he exemplified that this is what America feels.
Yep. Well done.
And he won't be the last.
Yeah. Pop Culture Thursday tomorrow. We'll find some stuff to dive into if we don't have any breaking news.
Do you want me to go? I can clickbait all night again?
Clickbait all night. Clickbait away.
There's some good stuff. You're fascinated by the Penguin story. Don't pretend you're not.
No, the Penguin one was good. That was really good. Penguins, the hollow bone versus the only part that threw me off was they're like other birds who swim and they have hollow bones. They're great swimmers too. So I'm surprised that they think that's the reason penguins are such great
birds
swimmers.
Are great?
Well, like ducks, like different things. Like there are underwater fowl that are like really, really good underwater.
Yeah, but don't they all
submerge and then they come back
quickly?
Up, but so do penguins.
I think they need the air.
Correct.
But I think penguins can probably, and they said they swim like up to 15 miles an hour, which I don't know how fast that is compared to a typical fish.
I'd have to look what like underwater fowl, like how fast.
Yeah, I don't know. And I'm just trying to picture like how fast can a trout go?
Yeah. I'm not saying that the bones don't help them. I was just like, I don't know how much it does. When I think of other birds, if their bones are hollow, they seem to be doing okay. So it just surprised me that they think that's like
don't they get such a start that they're like?
But see, that's what I was gonna say. To me, I would have thought, and again, I'm not a scientist. I'm not even saying these people are wrong. I'm trying to comprehend in my head. To me, the structure of the penguin had way more to do than with whether or not their bones were hollow.
No, I get that. To me, and the most not that we're penguin people here, but the most fascinating story of penguins isn't about their ability to swim. It's not about their mating rituals or whatever. It is about their migrations.
Yeah.
Their migratory patterns are incredible.
Yeah, it's out of this world. The pebble thing still fascinates me.
That's weird too.
Still really just like the first time.
And their care for the egg and all that stuff that's why they made March of the Penguins, because it's such a fascinating group. But how far they migrate.
Not only that too, like you think about the things you think about in a day and stuff like that. Like there are penguins that's the existence. So like you march, you sit on an egg. You march, you sit on an egg. Like that's the life. Like that is what you do.
They just try to keep it simple.
It's crazy. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. I'm Jeff Everett. He's Mark Messina. Thanks for watching the Midday Show.
We will see you.